You want to know something? I love the row. And I know you're going to say, well, what do you mean? Didn't you just make an entire video ripping the quiet luxury trend to shreds? Which I did, and I'm not taking back a word I said in my last video. But there are exceptions to every rule. And the row is my caveat. This is very much just my opinion, by the way. The point of this video isn't necessarily to get people to buy the brand, but rather buy into it, getting an understanding of why it has garnered such a cult following. Because I can see that its popularity hasn't exactly been popular. And I can also see why from that perspective. It's insanely expensive for one, and for some seemingly really boring and monotonous looking clothes, with no extensive brand history to it like some of the other heritage brands which have been around for the better part of the century and the last. But I intend to show how it's more than meets the eye, without the bog-standard reasons most diehard fans tend to give, usually that the quality and designs are exquisite, which they are, and it will be emphasized in this video, but I would like to try and recontextualize how it's seen by fans of the brand and why it's so special. So The Row is a celebrity clothing brand founded by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, the twins from Full House. Now fans may take issue with me calling it a celebrity brand, but it is quite literally the truth. And an enormous part of its history is centered around evading that celebrity status. Yet that's the one thing which sets it apart from other celebrity clothing brands, the fact that it's so anonymous to the everyday consumer. A good chunk, if not most of its target demographic, are not fans of Mary-Kate and Ashley. They either don't care who they are, or have no knowledge of their existence, or have no idea they were behind the brand. Consequently, this limitation became its strength. Every other clothing line partnered with or founded by a celebrity leans into its association and affiliation with the celebrity. Look at brands like Victoria Beckham and Alexa Chung, for instance. The celebrity name is right at the forefront of its branding. It's literally in the name. People buy it because they want to buy into the celebrity allure and lifestyle and wish to emulate that. The issue with that, unsurprisingly, is a lack of longevity because celebrity power cannot sustain a brand. And this has been proven time and time again. Victoria Beckham's revenue has been plummeting for a good few years now. David Beckham had to funnel money into it continuously, and they've had to lower their prices in an attempt to drive up sales. Alexa Chung's brand ended in 2022 after 5 years, even when it did thrive earlier on. Now, obviously, there are a number of factors which can contribute to a failing brand. Alexa Chung has credited much of its eventual downfall to the pandemic. Victoria Beckham's prices may have made it too unaffordable, its designs too generic to justify the high prices, or it simply failed to capture the attention of its target demographic of wealthy middle-aged women. There are many nuances to this, but ultimately I believe what it comes down to is the overuse of a celebrity name as a brand. In fact, I can count on one hand of the amount of celebrity brands which have managed to transcend its celebrity status after the initial hype and fame. And this doesn't just apply to clothing brands. Take the Kardashians, for example. Kylie Jenner's cosmetics line surged in popularity for the first few years of its establishment. At the very height of her fame, she was making almost $1 billion. And then look at her now. Her liquid lipsticks are sitting in stores collecting dust. KKW closed just after a couple of years, and Skin by Kim hasn't exactly been doing well since its launch. Even Khloe Kardashian's brand of jeans, Good American, is failing in sales. The reason for this is because all of them rely solely on their celebrity power rather than quality. And before you question my eligibility in commenting on their quality, I've tried most of their products and I can assure you that quality is not their strong suit. In contrast, Rihanna has seen consistent success with Fenty Beauty, Selena Gomez with Rare Beauty, and it's large in part due to their emphasis on aspects other than their own fame. Sure, it may have started in affiliation with them as celebrities, but people who bought their brands stayed for the quality of the products, not their name. I know that Kim tried to do this with Skims, but I still think she leaned towards promoting her brand as a celebrity too much. And the whole kimono controversy surrounding it at the beginning certainly did not do it any favors. Not to mention, the Kardashians have this tendency of relying on scandals and controversy to fuel their brand's popularity. It's actually quite on brand for them. But there's only so much you can buy from them until it starts to feel like buying celebrity merch, which has an element of distaste to it. I am aware that Rihanna and Selena have promoted their brands as well, but in relativity it feels much less influencer driven, so to speak. And because they let the quality speak for itself, they're able to sustain sales even after the boom from celebrity fame. I think that Mary-Kate and Ashley understood this concept very well, that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. They deliberately avoided their famed association with the brand at all costs. Even the name itself, The Row, is undeniably inconspicuous. If you didn't know, it's named after this fairly obscure street in Mayfair, London, the Savile Row, which is known for its bespoke tailoring stores for men. Hence, it's not a brand asking to be seen, it's a brand asking to be hidden. The Row's obscurity in this respect is rooted in two reasons. The first is that it reflects Mary-Kate and Ashley's elusive nature and affinity towards privacy. Even at the height of their fame, they had a tendency of staying out of the spotlight as much as possible, refusing to be interviewed or give away too much of themselves. The second reason, and arguably the more crucial one, is that they wanted to be taken seriously as real designers. They wanted to see if an anonymous brand can speak for itself through its design and quality alone. And they were one of the first celebrities to really do this, especially during an era where seemingly every celebrity was pushing their own clothing, beauty, or fragrance line. There's a reason why it's usually only one line and not a whole brand, because investors know it's not going to last after one line with the reliance of celebrity fame. So we really owe it to Mary-Kate and Ashley for pioneering this. They walked so celebrities like Rihanna and Selena can run. Something about the design and style makes it so unique and different from other designers. Every other mainstream luxury designer's products are overproduced and oversaturated. And I don't just mean in terms of the amount of products that are constantly pushed out every season. I mean in terms of the type of products being pushed. I can't imagine how many iterations of the same design all these luxury designers have produced, to the extent that nothing feels carefully thought through and special. Of course, there are creative designs evident in their collections, but an immense portion of these collections feels mass-produced and often gimmicky. Take, for example, brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Dior, Saint Laurent, the creme de la creme of luxury fashion. Every collection for at least the past few seasons or years now have been increasingly overwhelming. From Pharrell Williams' Minecraft-esque pixelation to Eddie Sliman's intense Parisian rocker chic, it becomes alarmingly difficult to stomach. And you might say I'm being unfairly discriminatory against loud and proud fashion, but even more subtle brands I tend to favor over the years, such as Loewe, Bottega Veneta, and Celine, have for some reason transformed into this unstoppable force of marketing mania. Loewe's Studio Ghibli line, Bottega's Intrecciato and Diamo bag madness, Celine bringing back the Triomphe logo with the Triomphe bag, I can't seem to avoid nowadays. Churning out a myriad of collections which rely on the same gimmicky tactics to drum up interest and attention. It's extremely tiring and towing the line of fast fashion, which is what most of us buy luxury to avoid, presumably. You see it in how they promote themselves, shoving it down our throats through ads, collaborations, extensive campaigns, social media, influencer plugs. It's sort of a widely known concept that when something demands attention, it's usually devoid of true substance because it relies on external attraction and praise to give it meaning and value. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these designs and products lack creativity and substance in essence. There's undoubtedly a unique artistic vision exhibited by these highly rated, talented designers. I'm simply pointing out the over-commercialization of designer luxury, and somewhere along the way, the art loses its meaning. So this is how the Row has always stood in juxtaposition to these other designers. First of all, I'm fully aware that without being tied to a massive conglomerate like LVMH allows complete artistic freedom and creative control over their products. Not being bogged down by tedious corporate concerns like annual revenue targets and sales growth lets their designs shine that much brighter, but also allows each collection to breathe and take its time in capturing their audience's attention. I like to call a brand's consumers an audience because fashion is a form of art to be consumed. It requires an audience to understand the meaning and craft behind its production. And the Row is very much a brand which leans into this and truly treats fashion like art. Its Instagram page is a clear indication of this. Every other brand uses Instagram to promote their products constantly and heavily, whereas one glance at the Row's Instagram and you wouldn't be blamed for perceiving it as a page for an art gallery, because they're not interested in showing off their clothes as much as showing you the inspiration and vision behind them. It's that golden rule we often see in other forms of media like film and cinema: show, not tell. Stop telling your audience they need these clothes and show them why it's worth experiencing them. The experience in itself itself is very much rooted in the Rose ethos. Since the brand actively flies under the radar, a lot of their promotional material comes from word of mouth and personal experience. It doesn't forcibly tell you how to feel about their clothes, but lets you experience the brand yourself through building your own relationship with it, feeling the quality of the products in your body, using their accessories on a daily basis, how you wear them and incorporate them into your everyday life. These are things the row wants you to experience. It wants to see how you would style their clothes, make it your own. It has a very distinct style which is instantly recognizable, and it does this without any logos or unnecessary patterns. That simplicity gives it its signature character and individuality which you don't see in a lot of other brands. This isn't to say that subtlety and minimalism is superior to prints and patterns. It's just that it's usually harder to create a distinct style with obvious bold patterns. Not many minimalist brands have managed to stand out through plain garments alone. I can only think of a handful, and it's usually only due to their avant-garde nature. Some examples being Rick Owens and Yohji Yamamoto. Minimalist brands tend to require their style exuding substance in order to capture attention, which is no easy feat. Earlier I mentioned the issue of most mainstream luxury designers relying on all style but no substance. And you're going to say, well, what is substance anyways? What does substance mean? It's a very tricky question, especially in fashion. The discussion of style versus substance and substance versus style comes up quite frequently in art, not just in illustrative art, but in other forms like movies and film. Fashion has always been perceived as a lower form of art compared to paintings, architecture, music, literature, and film, and as a result taken less seriously. I've always rejected this notion. I see fashion taking elements of these other forms of art and culminating them into one. And what's so great about it is that you live your life in it. But it's generally seen as a dumber art form because of this reason. The frequency in which you see and interact with it every day creates an oversaturation in its supply, hence a lack of originality and meaning behind it, especially with the presence of fast fashion. And people aren't wrong in thinking of it that way. The majority of fashion is quite simply just clothes. They serve a functional purpose in keeping us clothed and warm. We don't necessarily have to read into it any more than that. But substance does exist in fashion as it does in other forms of art. And I'm going to draw comparisons between fashion and film as a means of explaining what I think substance is in art, and ultimately fashion. On the surface, it doesn't seem like fashion and film have much in common besides being in the category of art. But I assure you there are more similarities than you might think. Nowadays, most movies are mass-produced by various streaming platforms, the same way clothes are mass-produced by various fast fashion brands. They're shallow and vapid, devoid of any real meaning. And they're meant to be made and sold to the public that way. Easily consumable content, as most people just want to be entertained the same way they want wearable clothes. It's a straightforward functionality. But then you get the other end of the spectrum. Films with a distinct voice and direction. Art house cinema, for instance. Or movies directed by specific directors with a particular style. They call this auteur cinema. Films which reflect the director's personal creative vision. I find this interestingly applicable to high fashion, where a creative director's vision is distinct and consistent in a brand or clothing line. And I wonder why people don't talk about auteur theory in fashion as much as they should. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with the idea of auteur fashion. Auteur in French means author. It's quite self-explanatory. It simply means exhibiting narrative presence within a piece of art. Some famous examples of auteur directors being Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson, and Quentin Tarantino. If you've seen any of their movies, you know it's directed by them when you see it. The same way you can tell which fashion house or creative director a piece of clothing comes from. To me, substance in film is that overarching narrative voice in a movie, the point an auteur film director is trying to make through the storytelling, plot progression, character development, etc. When done well, the director's vision is brilliantly depicted and invokes specific emotions we wouldn't otherwise feel without having seen and experienced their work. Nolan, through Oppenheimer's eagerness to create the atomic bomb before the Nazis, wants us to feel the internal struggle of a troubled scientist who inadvertently triggered a tragic chain of events, which have led us to our current point in humanity. Due to a lack of control over a weapon of unfathomable destruction, he naively thought he could gain control over. Scorsese, through Jordan Belfort's downward spiral into greed and addiction for power, money, and status, wants us to feel the exhaustion of overindulgence and materialism in corporate America. Hence, going back to my earlier question of what substance means in the context of fashion, it's in narrative the creative director is trying to portray through their fashion line. If we view every collection like a film, there's usually an overarching theme or story behind the collection. Just as a movie would have a consistent storyline and themes a director intends to convey through the story. It wouldn't always be immediately apparent in every collection, especially if the creative director doesn't actively talk about the narrative or if it isn't promoted that way. It's like how some themes are more obvious in certain movies than others. The most surface level stories usually being large Hollywood blockbusters, whereas art house cinema is known for its abstract themes hidden under layers of meaning, akin to surrealist avant-garde fashion houses like Alexander McQueen, Schiaparelli, Margiela, or Mugler. So if substance is the what, style is the how. It's how the artist chooses to convey the story and themes. In film, it's the dialogue, the characters, visual depiction, everything down to the lighting, score, etc. In fashion, it's the aesthetic, the materials used, the construction of a garment, how it looks and feels on the person wearing it. The definitions of substance and style are not always clear-cut though. Sometimes they can be one and the same. For instance, Tarantino is a director known for creating substance through style. Various storylines interwoven together in an unconventional structure and non-linear timeline. Sprinkle in some excessive drawn-out, witty, gripping, almost poetic dialogue between morally ambiguous characters. The use of plot, anticipation, and suspense, numerous heavy references to other movies, and his incessant need to shoot on film rather than digital. All this is arguably style for the sake of style, but over the years, this style has become his substance. All his themes are fairly straightforward. Pulp Fiction is about redemption, Kill Bill is about revenge, Inglourious Bastards is World War II satire. But the aesthetic and stylistic decisions really hit home these themes. You feel it like a gut punch. Are they necessarily complex themes with insurmountable depth? No, but it's undeniably entertaining to watch. There are so many designers who approach fashion in a Tarantino-esque way. Take McQueen for instance, his exploration of futuristic fashion with his armadillo shoe, where he imagines a dystopian world underwater after global flooding and humans having evolved to survive in such conditions. Excessive and overglorified, if you ask me, and not wearable by any means. But it conveys his narrative efficiently and effectively, shockingly I might add, and it certainly captures our attention and gets people talking. Both style and substance are just as important as the other, and this is where the root of a lot of problems with high fashion begins. Most films have become perpetually commercialized over the years, even when directed by well-known respected directors. The same way high fashion has become over-commercialized despite being in the hands of skilled creative directors. This is because executive producers will always have a hold over a movie's creative control, just as LVMH has a hold over literally every fashion label. That's just unfortunately a byproduct of extreme American capitalism, and as a consequence, art suffers. In particular, substance in art, because it's not as readily marketable as style. It reminds me of Martin Scorsese's criticism of the Marvel franchise being compared to going to a theme park rather than watching an actual film, and his issue with producing movies with formulaic scripts rapidly becoming the norm over the years, which is how I'm starting to see high fashion at this day and age, with its formulaic clothing production made to be sold to the masses and drenched in a loss of artistic integrity. Not everyone would agree with my take on auteur fashion. Phoebe Philo, for one, recently in Vanessa Friedman's New York Times article talked about narrative being unnecessary in clothing and a lack of pretense, in particular for her namesake fashion line. She doesn't feel the need to explain herself and doesn't see storytelling as a crucial or integral part of fashion, to which I am inclined to disagree with strongly. Narrative and context is what makes me buy into high fashion, especially at such obscene price points. It's what differentiates high fashion from high street fashion or fast fashion. Not to mention, it's astoundingly hypocritical coming from someone like Phoebe, whom, as fellow philophiles would know, during her tenure at Celine, was known for her presence of narrative in her work. I mean, she dedicated a whole season to her love of cars and another few seasons in reference to niche avant-garde artwork. So for her to say narrative and storytelling isn't important comes off a bit self-unaware, to say the least. This brings me to the point of functionality in fashion. Functionality is to fashion what entertainment value is to film. It's meant to be what they should be achieving on the most fundamental level. So even if there is a lack of originality, style, or narrative presence, they at least have to deliver the basics. In fashion, it's the wearability of the clothes. I talked about the over-commercialization of fashion and film being the root cause of an overemphasis on style rather than substance. But the difference is, while in movies, the emphasis of style comes from from a place of creating entertainment, in fashion, it's most certainly isn't coming from a place of making clothes wearable. In fact, it's almost a last thing on their list of priorities. How it looks is always the most important thing, because it's the most marketable, especially at this day and age with social media and online shopping becoming more of the norm over going to an actual store. You would think this phenomenon only exists in high street brands with a presumably lower overhead, but even high fashion brands with an almost unlimited budget would produce clothes which fit weirdly, has questionable material choices, and inconsistent sizing. Take Jacquemus, for example. Brilliantly designed at first glance, looks incredible on the runway, and has an undeniably creative ethos inspired by Simon Jacquemus's southern French roots. So I bought a blazer, trousers, skirt, and 2 dresses. For context, I'm a French size 32 to 34 and 5 feet 5 in height. Pretty standard figure, I would think. The only ones which fit properly without tailoring are the blazer, albeit the slightly broad shoulders, but it's acceptable given the intended oversized look, and the dress, but only because it's stretchable, and the use of mohair makes it impossible to wash well and leaves residue everywhere it goes. The trousers and skirt are made of wool, which is adequate, but the sizing is just all over the place and could not be worn without tailoring. The other dress, I have no words. I almost had to sew myself into it and cut myself out. Look, I know Jacquemus and the likes are supposed to be more outlandish looking, but I can't fathom what sort of extraterrestrial being is meant to fit into these clothes. I removed a good 3 inches off the hem of those trousers with a waistline of around 24 inches, and I wouldn't say I have particularly short legs either. So unless you look like a pool noodle, who are these clothes designed for really? Not to mention the famous Le Chiquito bag, which holds a capacity of approximately 1 singular puff of air. Why would anyone pay upwards of 400 to 500 pounds for something that doesn't do the one job it's supposed to do? And this is just one of the many examples of high fashion brands putting style over wearability, which I'm not so much surprised but disappointed by. These clothes are not made to last. Quite the contrary. They're made to capture your interest for 1 season and leave you wanting more. Factors like quality and longevity are an afterthought when it should be treated with the same level of attention and care as a design. There are, of course, designers who do put emphasis on quality and are known for it. For instance, Max Mara's Cochito Amano hand-stitched wool felt coats, or Hermes's handcrafted leather bags. But more often than not, we've come to a point in fashion where the quality and wearability of a designer's products are not what comes to mind, rather the aesthetic or desirability of the label itself. So how do I relate all this back to The Row? The Row treats functionality as an art form. It's a clothing brand made by 2 founders who are passionate about clothes and making clothes, from setting a proper sleeve right down to the performance of a fabric. Because to The Row, functionality is the substance and the style. It is a running narrative that has been consistent in every one of their collections. The art of functionality is no easy feat. Despite it being a necessity and so prevalent in our everyday lives, I doubt many can say what makes clothes truly functional. And usually the most functional clothes are not the most aesthetically pleasing. It takes a true artist to create great fashion, but it takes someone who loves clothes to make great clothes. Mary-Kate and Ashley are not artists, at least not in the traditional sense. They are not the Phoebe Philos and Karl Lagerfelds of the industry, designers who graduated from Central St. Martin's, who have been in the industry since the beginning of their careers. Fashion enthusiasts tend to look down on newcomers who seemingly came from nowhere and don't have the necessary qualifications on their resume, but that doesn't make them any less of a player in the game. I spent a good portion of this video comparing fashion to film because I want people to take fashion as seriously as they take other forms of art, the same way newcomers should be taken seriously as veterans of the industry. Mary-Kate and Ashley should be taken seriously because of how passionate they are about clothes and making clothes. In fact, I'd say their counterpart in the film industry would be Tarantino, who had no prior training in making movies. He was simply a guy who worked at a video store, who was unapologetically passionate about movies and could just about name every movie ever produced in the history of film. He may not be Stanley Kubrick or Martin Scorsese, but that man knows how to make one hell of a movie simply because he knows what keeps an audience entertained, which makes him a formidable player in the industry. Likewise, Mary-Kate and Ashley knows what keeps their customers interested in their clothes, in spite of the seeming simplicity in their designs. They know customers keep returning for the craftsmanship and level of care and precision they put into making these clothes, and how wearable they are to the everyday working individual. And this stretches beyond functionality and wearability. There is artistic vision involved with which adds to the substance, however subtle it may be. To which I would add, the subtlety is also a part of the substance and style. Their latest collection exhibited so much creativity and unique visuals. As I've said previously, it's more difficult to convey creativity and originality with such understated designs, and yet I believe they have achieved this to the fullest extent, all the while remaining functional. Resort 2025 displayed so much individuality and character by taking inspiration from a myriad of elements. Oriental aesthetics with the use of Chinese abacuses as a backdrop, regal yet modern cape-like coats which convey quiet extravagance, paying homage to Issey Miyake's Pleats Please collection, which at that time was created to fit the movement of dancers, and when applied to today's trends, fits the notion of smart, casual, and day-to-night transitional dressing, put together yet comfortable. A perfect way to describe Mary-Kate and Ashley's own everyday sense of style. Take a look at spring 2024, for instance. Look at how this jacket is tied around the waist so casually, despite this being a smart look, reminiscent of how we would tie a jacket around the waist for the ease and comfort of not having to carry it around with us when running around in the city. A subtle nod to its functionality yet adds something interesting to the style. Or the use of a pop of color, something which the twins themselves do in their own style, as well as color blocking, a reference to Phoebe Philo's famous bright juxtaposing color blocking, albeit with more toned down shades. Art imitates life, and life imitates art, so they say. It's not that they were the first designers to have ever achieved this. Phoebe Philo pioneered this concept of balancing design and functionality in most of her collections in Celine, but by doing it in every single one of their collections, this has become a staple when you think of the row. Along with the inspiration taken from other known designers, you see and feel their love of clothes through their clothes. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record. Tarantino is also known to steal ideas from many directors, but you know how much he loves films from watching his movies. There's nothing more satisfying and exciting than seeing how much an artist loves their work and everything around it. Interest draws interest. Enthusiasm draws enthusiasm. As a consumer, you might not know why something is good, but you just know that you enjoy it because you feel the passion behind it. It's not just about finding an outfit interesting to look at. It's also about waking up and being excited about getting dressed in these clothes and being able to wear them on a daily basis. From work to going out in the evening to a casual stroll on a lazy Saturday afternoon. Because they're so wearable, easy, and comfortable. Everything about each collection just exudes ease and comfort. There's so much fluidity in how the clothes move on the body. The experience of wearing clothes is so much more important than people realize. I don't just want to look the part of a serious working woman. I need to feel the part. And that can only be achieved if I feel comfortable in the clothes. It's like being comfortable in my own skin. So by focusing so intensely on this enthusiasm to make quality clothes, not only does it achieve Mary-Kate and Ashley's running desire of creating distinctive style without the use of logos and allowing a clothing line to stand on its own solely through quality, it accomplishes more than what it's set out to achieve, creating art out of mundane life. It references the casual moments in life, which at a glance may seem insignificant but have more impact than one would think, such as the dressing habits of the average working woman. I think it's mostly unintentional, which is ultimately the genius behind it. Some of the best things in art were unplanned and unintentional, and it doesn't mean that they were flukes either. It just means that because so much thought was put into it from the beginning, that it set in motion a chain of events unbeknownst to their predictions, such as the quiet luxury trend lifting the road to immense heights. Even amidst the inconspicuous and monotonous nature of quiet luxury, it was able to stand out amongst all these other established brands. And I know what the main issue most people would have with the row, despite having said all this. Does any of this really justify the prices? To which I would say, whether something justifies the pricing is entirely subjective and up to the individual person. People would drop some top dollar on other luxury goods like jewelry and cars, and it's entirely in accordance to what people like and what they can afford, whether a product is worth it or not. Some of the stuff from the row do have questionable pricing, but I can still enjoy and understand a brand without believing it's worth the full price. I do own a few pieces which I love to death, such as the Margot, the Marion, the T1 zip boots, plus some shirts and trousers. But no, I probably wouldn't have gotten them if they hadn't been on sale or secondhand at a reduced price. Though I will say that touching and feeling the smooth leather Margot bag for the first time was a life-changing experience. And it makes me wonder why any of the top-tier luxury brands aren't creating leather goods of similar quality if they cost more or less the same anyways. In fact, every single piece in my collection has been cherished and used to its fullest extent brand, given how easy it is to wear. They are, without a shadow of a doubt, pieces that are made to last in your wardrobe till the end of time. I think it's about what you prioritize in luxury fashion. If you're someone who prioritizes quality and longevity above all else, you would probably be attracted to this brand. If it's simply the styling, I think it can be replicated fairly easily with a number of substitutes, given how influential the style has become. Cost is a good example, for instance, or even certain selections from Massimo Dutti. The crucial factor is the level of comfort and ease you feel when you style it the way the Row does. That being said, there are a number of products which cannot simply be replicated because only the Row can make it the way the Row does. So I hope that this video has given some insight into why people are getting excited over some seemingly really boring clothes. I know I went on a complete tangent about style and substance, but I thought it was an interesting discussion which helped contextualize the brand's ethos and hype around it. You hear a lot about how designers love fashion and the fashion inspiration behind their collections, but it's not every day that you hear how much a designer loves clothes and make it a point to make just simply amazing clothes. And at the end of the day, we like fashion because we like clothes, which are made to be worn and used, not just to be displayed.